From recruiting and consulting firm Riderflex, I'm your host, Steve Urban, and here is your Riderflex podcast episode of the day. Sound good? Any questions, sir?
No, ready to go.
I can tell you your accent, has been watered down a little bit. I don't know what the word is, but it's not super strong Melbourne, right? I can tell you've lived in the States, you lived over in Europe, and it's watered down a little bit. Is that accurate?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I think most people I meet in the US still think I have a beautiful Australian accent, but definitely my friends back home, give me a little bit of stick for having an accent that's changed. But I think what you find is, when I started, traveling and working in the States, I was in my early 20s and I had a pretty thick Australian accent. And you quickly learn that there's just certain words that just don't resonate and you're trying to get your message across. And part of it is changing out words, napkin for serviette, in a restaurant, just simple things like that. And then part of it is, just emphasizing the R's and just making sure your words are a little bit clearer so you don't have to repeat yourself. So you do that enough times for 20 years and you slowly adapt. I think the classic example is the famous Australian golfer, Greg Norman, who has no resemblance of Australian accent left in him, if you listen to him today.
By the way, I'm a huge fan of his shirts. I wear his polo shirts all the time. And the primary reason for that is because as you get older in your mid 50s, your gut sometimes kind of starts to, maybe your little pot belly kind of starts easing out there. And he makes those shirts specifically for guys like me that hide that very well.
That's funny. But I got to tell you, Steve, so something I like to do is if I'm in an elevator in the US or something like that, I like to just, bring on my Australian, not charm, I guess my Australian heritage. And I do drop in a g'day, which always clearly indicates my Australian background.
Love it. Tell us, Travis, about yourself. Some personal history. Yeah, let's go all the way back. Maybe some family, your parents, siblings, where you grew up. Talk to us about that a little bit before we get into business too much.
Yeah, so I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, and really grew up around. My dad was just loved technology, and it was really a technology visionary entrepreneur. Never called himself any of those words, and long before anyone knew what that meant. But what it meant to me was I grew up with someone that just loved technology, and he was always building computers and building radios and messing around with whatever he could get his hands on. And so from a young age, I was really thrown into that environment of build this computer and, help fix this printer. And, and that was kind of some of the early days of working together was that. My mum has really been the ambassador of the family. And, I loved my sports when I was younger. I played a lot of tennis. So mum was my drove me around and coached me and supported me in my sporting sort of ventures. And also have a couple of sisters, one that I'm in business with and one that was always out of the business. So that was kind of the early days of upbringing in Australia.
So what was the business? Was it software? Yeah. Talk to us about during those early days, what was your dad's business? What was he selling? Was he selling a service? Was he selling equipment? Was he selling software? What was he selling early on?
So this business, which originally was founded with the name StarNet Systems, which I rebranded a few years ago to something that resonated more with our global market and sort of vision, was primarily software. But back then, because hardware was so expensive and difficult to come by, we also had to build and sort of sell and package up our own hardware just to make it viable to sell the software. So in the early days, where we really started off in our sort of space around residential communities is working with colleges doing the telephone management. So activating the phones in the rooms, much like you would for a hotel, turn the phone on, charge for the calls, turn the phone off. That was an old DOS-based system in the early 90s and then evolved to Windows. But we were very good at doing that and quickly realized there was a gap there when we need to do more than that. We need to also book that room out and manage the arrival process and bill for rent. And basically, we just kept evolving, listening to our customers and adapting. And by the end of the 90s, the telephone management was basically an obsolete piece of technology with phone cards, mobile phones, internet, so good thing, you got to keep pivoting with your business and adapting, because otherwise that original business just simply wouldn't be here today. But we'd already evolved, really jumped on to emerging technology very early in terms of the internet, building out, online tools for residents. And then, really, I think got our break when we went and grew internationally. And that was really what my focus was for the best part of my career was, going in particular to the US and helping build the company up over there.
So early on, your dad was a tech gadget guy, and in the beginning, the revenue, he was making money by connecting the phone or turning the phones off and on in colleges. That was actually the first set of revenue, or one of the first sets of revenue.
Correct. Yep. So that was a software sale. We also sold the hardware that managed it. And that was the early days. It was pretty lean. Our story is a little bit different to most tech companies that have funding or or similar. We did it the old-fashioned way, brick by brick, and we did it with no debt or no funding. So you got to build it slowly, and you have to make sure that you're delivering great value so you can retain those customers and keep building on that success.
Did you know that you wanted to work for your dad early on, or when you were in college, were you like, I noticed you majored in accounting and finance. Were you like, I want to do my own thing? And was there a push and pull between you and your dad way back then?
Look, I think honestly it was a necessity in the early days. Really the whole family's, I guess, livelihood was at stake. Whether or not as a family we'd have a roof over our head and things like that. So I really joined, and there wasn't a lot of compensation in those early 5 to 10 years. It was really about just helping keep the lights on, and trying to support my dad, I guess, in his endeavors. And but I quickly fell in love with what I was doing, and I love the environment that I was working in, and realized that I also had some great skills in that sort of domain. In fact, the difference between my dad and my sister and I, who joined in the business early on, we were very complementary skill sets. So he was much more a deep technical person, but we were really good with the accounting, finance, business, and then I think for me, the sales, the marketing, and the international expansion. So our skill sets actually complemented each other really well. So kind of fell into it. When I finished my degree, because we were really struggling in that time, I definitely contemplated, do I need to get a real job to pay the bills here, and think about it. But I was young enough that it didn't matter too much either. We could live on very little and just see where things went. So we just kept being very persistent. And a characteristic my dad had, which I loved and think about a lot, is he's very tenacious. And so no one said we'd make it, but no one said we'd fail. Let's just keep going.
Just keep
was
going.
Really kind of just keep going, keep pushing. You get knockbacks, just keep going. And so, and as I said, it was kind of there was kind of an expectation just to keep going, not necessarily that we'd fail or succeed. It's just, we can do this. Let's keep going.
So, it's interesting. I'm really glad you're sharing this story. Some people probably would look at your situation and make some assumptions without digging into the details, that your dad started this business and he was a millionaire and you just came along and then he handed it to you and transitioned, right? I mean, that happens to a lot of family members. What you're telling me is, no. That's not even close. I came out of college wondering if I should get another job because he was barely paying his bills. I didn't know if this thing was going to make it. I mean, that is a little bit different than so many other family transitional stories. So I appreciate you sharing that with me. Now, you weren't married or anything at that time. You're a single guy coming out of college when you were helping your dad, right? Single at the time.
Correct.
And your sister, how old was she? The one that's in the business?
My business partner, she probably doesn't want me to state the exact number, but she's a little bit older than me, and at that time we're starting to have a family here in Australia. And that, so basically, the way we looked at it was, I was probably the most available to go and try to pursue the international businesses, and the Australian business was getting quite busy at that time. So my dad and her really focused on the Australian business and kind of left me to go and explore what opportunities we could find overseas.
What was her function? Accounting, finance?
Yeah, both. We have very similar skill sets in that way. So, we both sort of oversaw the finances of the business in the early days, and still, I still have our CFO report up to me directly.
Did you and her ever have conversations like, no, was she like, hey, I want to be CEO?
I think you'd find that she's much more comfortable out of the limelight. Not that I seek the limelight, but I'm really passionate about what I do. I'm much more comfortable, I guess, in terms of speaking on a stage in front of our customers and things like that. So I think she's quite happy to kind of support me, with that, and really enjoys, the things that she gets to focus on.
You guys, the family owns the business 100% now. Have you guys ever taken on any outside cash or investors?
Nothing, not a dollar. So yeah, which is it's a long way to build a business. We've been around 30 years, and I kind of joke we're a 30-year overnight success story. And I'm envious of early stage companies that can accelerate their growth. Probably what we did in 30 years can be done in 5 or 10 years if you've got the right funding and expertise. So I'm not adverse to startups or early stage companies taking on funding and investment. I think it's a great vehicle. But on the flip side, I think our business journey has been very rewarding because, we've always had all of our livelihoods at stake. And because we haven't really ever borrowed, we just had to make it work. We had to build a profitable business. We had to, even if you think of last year, there's a lot of businesses that just were not prepared for, a tough economic situation. Because we've always built a very financially healthy business. We've got reserves, we've got a healthy, balance sheet, and we've built that over a long period of time so that we've got options on the table if we need to invest or we need to expand or do things differently. And we don't have to panic and quickly raise money to get us through a 6-12 month period, which is what happened to a lot of tech companies.
Right. How big's the company employee size right now? How big are you?
So we're around 170 people globally right now, and growing.
3 offices, 3 different continents, 170 employees, 30 years in business, and transitioned from dad to children successfully. That's pretty major accomplishment, my friend. Pretty major. I mean, not a lot of people can do that.
Thanks. Look, I think it's one of those things where when you sit back and reflect, which you don't get much of a chance to do, you do, count your lucky stars that you've had a good journey and things have kind of worked out pretty well. But, day to day, you're not thinking about that. Day to day, you're thinking about, we've got to make the product better and we've got to improve customer service and we've got to get that new feature out the door and we've got to get that new partnership done. And, so I think we're highly, highly motivated. And I think that's the thing though, is even after 30 years in business, we've got kind of the maturity of a stable long-term company, which a lot of people like. But we've got this youth and energy and enthusiasm about wanting to improve and wanting to, evolve. And so, I think those things actually balance each other out really well.
Give us the elevator pitch for StarRez right now as it stands today. Give us the 3 to 5 minute, pitch. Go for it.
Sure. So, we are the global leaders in residential accommodation software. So what that really means is we're a booking platform primarily for universities, colleges, PBSAs, which are purpose-built student accommodation, which are generally private property developers that are also building and supplying student accommodation, student housing. But more broadly, we serve other markets that we're not as well known for. So things like build to rent, co-living, staff housing. So we've got great clients like Vail Ski Resorts, where we manage all of the staff housing across 15 mountains in North America. We've got theme parks where we do the same for all the staff there. So really you can think of it as a solution that's quite adaptable. And there's a couple of different components to our solution. So one is that resident experience where people can go online, they can book their room, they can find a roommate, they can sign a contract, they can pay their bill, and they can move in. And of course, in the current world, they can move in with contactless, barcode QR codes. They can book the time they're going to arrive for social distancing. And we have everything from package tracking to resident welfare and a whole suite of tools that go along with it. Of course, that's backed by things like integration, reporting, analytics, dashboards, so that it's an enterprise level solution that allows our customers to really manage and oversee all aspects of their community. And something you hear that I'm really passionate about is what I call a thriving residential community. And if you think about the best residential communities, even, the ones that we live in, as normal people, they're communities where people are super engaged, where people are very respectful, where people are participating, where people are helping out, where people are helping their neighbors. And, that really resonates with us and our community, and our software is a great enabler of managing all of those different aspects. StarRez has been very successful in more than 25 countries now. We've got over 800 customers. We manage around 2.2 million beds around the world.
Wow.
Through our platform, which means that you end up with millions and millions of users every year using this solution. And it's all something that we've never outsourced, development, design, any aspect of what we do. So we design the software ourselves. Product vision and product design is something I'm really passionate about. So I work very closely with the product team. We build it all with StarRez people, and we deliver it with StarRez services people, and then we support it with StarRez customer support. So between Melbourne, UK, and Denver, which is sort of the primary locations, that's where we've got our teams located to serve our global customer base.
So is it a SaaS business? I mean, or is it you buy the software? What's the business model? What's the revenue business model for you? Is it a monthly service, or how does that work?
Yeah, so if you look historically, any company that's been around, more than say 5, years, will of course have a history of perpetual enterprise customers and licenses and on-premise software. So we still have that. Today, as we sit, we've got more than 60% of our customers in the cloud and on a subscription model. So we introduced that model about 5 years ago. And it's a tough thing for companies to do, because you're disrupting some of the things that make your business great. So when you move to a large upfront sort of perpetual enterprise model and spread that out over a 3 to 5 year period for that subscription, you're intentionally reducing your top line revenue. You're reducing your profit during those years. You're impacting your cash flow. And that's why you see a lot of even public companies struggle to make that transition, because it doesn't please investors in that 3 to 5 year period while they're doing it. For us, because we're private, we can make decisions that we feel really help us in the long term, regardless of the short term impact. So we intentionally disrupted our traditional business model to move to subscription about 5 years ago, and have now built a much more resilient business off the back of that, which much more predictable in terms of the way our financials are managed. For us, it's an annual subscription. We don't, because of the size and scale, and it's B2C instead of B2B. It's B2B instead of B2C. It's on an annual subscription basis, not a monthly subscription basis.
You have pivoted so many times over 30 years. I mean, several different ways. I mean, wow. I mean, a lot of people can't do that. I mean, really, congratulations on getting through a lot of those transitional periods. What's the hardest thing for your team when you make a major pivot that you've found over the years?
Look, I think the hardest thing is, I probably have more ideas than we have time and capabilities and resources to do. And I think collectively as a team, we have more ideas than we can really ever get to. So I think the toughest thing is to prioritize. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm not the greatest at it. I really, we sit down in a leadership meeting and we've got the 10 top most pivotal things we need to do. Pick one, Travis, just pick one. I'm like, we've got to do at least 5 of these. We've got to find a way to do it, and let's talk about how we can resource it and do it differently. And, I think, but I think the fact that we are willing to continue to invest, we're willing to disrupt what is normal. I think that's fundamental. We would certainly not be in business and be successful after 30 years. If you look at even that first period where we're, focused on the telephone management, if we'd hung on to that, we wouldn't be in business. Right. As we moved into the 2000s, had we not expanded internationally, the business wouldn't have been viable. If we'd not adopted cloud, we really again, moved to cloud long before cloud was really becoming a standard. And when people said, oh, well, universities will never want their data in the cloud, that's crazy, that's just insecure. And, we were really pushing the envelope on that, probably more than 8 years ago, maybe more than 9 years ago, moving our first couple of clients into the cloud. And everyone was expecting all this resistance. And we're just willing, I guess, to embrace whatever comes along with that and adapt as we go and find a way to make it work. So, it's like, well, let's just figure out how to overcome that barrier. People worry about security of the cloud. Let's use one of the top two providers in the cloud. Let's not, go the cheap route. So we doubled down on Microsoft Azure. It was Azure AWS for us. We were not going to take a risk. And a lot of our competitors, look at cheaper alternatives, which is great because they have a cheaper price, but those solutions are just not as secure. Let's also go and get our own compliance. So we went and got our own SOC 2 compliance, our own PCI compliance, things that most companies really don't want to have to deal with because it brings a whole nother layer of accountability, to your security management. But we said, let's do that because that's going to, one, make the business better, and two, make sure that when people put their data in the StarRez cloud, they can think of it like a vault and it's going to be safe. And that's going to make people feel a lot more comfortable out moving to the cloud. So yeah, you're right, Steve. There's a lot of, if you look back historically, it's probably every 5 years we've made some tough calls, which at the time seemed like maybe we're going a little bit early with some of those things, but in the long run proved to be, the right call.
Well, you've done them, and correct me if I'm wrong, didn't have to take on cash, didn't have to take on an outside investor, didn't have to go in debt, kept the company cash flow positive. I mean, and kept increasing revenue. I mean, that's wow, those are all major accomplishments. Really, my hat's off to you there. Let me ask you, are you growing? Are you running it right now as a continued lifestyle business for the employees in your family, or have you positioned yourself, or are you going to position yourself for an acquisition or to go public? What do you have a plan like that, or you're just having fun running it?
Look, yeah, it's. I mean, of course, with our profile now, I think there's a lot of interest in a company like StarRez. I think we would obviously be on the radar of people who would love to acquire StarRez one day. The reality is we still love what we do. We still feel like we're young enough and energetic, and we're enjoying the journey. And I think by being private, we still can really help map out our own course, and it gives our team a lot of empowerment too. Because if someone's got an idea or something they want to do quickly, we don't have much red tape here. We can act very quickly on great ideas and change our course. So look, maybe one day that will still be the right thing to do, to either bring on someone that can help, accelerate our growth to another level, or enable us to be complementary to another, company or product. But at the moment, that's not in my plans. I very much have some plans with StarRez to grow the company based off of our own investments and based off of our own ideas. One of the things we're really focused on right now is finishing this move to becoming a 100% cloud and SaaS business.
Okay.
So we've got a lot of activities to undertake to do that. And that's a big aspiration for us over the next 3 years. And that unlocks a lot of potential, for the business to get all of our customers migrated over to our cloud platform. And the other one is really moving StarRez to being an ecosystem and a platform. We've got this amazing customer base around the world. There's a lot of great, technology solutions out there. And so instead of trying to build all of these solutions ourselves, which just doesn't scale, let's just find great partners that got amazing solutions and plug them into StarRez and distribute that around the world. So if you look at things like DocuSign as a great example of a partner that we're working with, they already handle secure contracts better than just about anyone in the world. We don't need to go and build that technology. We just do a partnership with them. We do integration, and then all of our customers around the world can easily adopt that into their solution, which makes the StarRez offering better, makes DocuSign better. And so really we're focused on, much like a Salesforce has built out their app exchange or similar, we have a strategy to really build out our partnership ecosystem. And it's a pretty exciting kind of time for us right now as we're bringing on new partners and announcing them and launching them.
How have you been mentored as a CEO besides your dad? I noticed you were in YPO, by the way. And I can just tell by the way you speak that you've been in some groups like that and you've been around the CEOs. I can tell you aren't just some kid that dad just handed the business to. Like, you've invested time probably in relationships and mentoring. I'm just curious about that. What else besides YPO and your dad have you done to keep yourself growing and learning as a CEO?
Yeah, I mean, no, YPO, if people are not familiar with it, Young Presidents Organization, it's a global network, around 30,000 CEOs around the world. I'm actually a great, I'm a huge fan of YPO. I'm a very active member of our chapter. I'm involved in our EXCO, which is the executive committee in our chapter. And I've really worked hard to utilize the benefits of that, attending a lot of global conferences, reaching out to CEOs all around the world. For example, one of the ways that I've been able to accelerate, I guess, our move to SaaS is there was about 15 YPOers around the world that put out a message and said, hey, we'd love to form basically a SaaS board, and we'll meet every quarter and we'll talk about SaaS metrics and challenges and growth. And, so that's a whole nother subgroup of YPO. Just yesterday, we had a question about something we were doing with how we were, managing something, and I can just put out a quick Slack message, and it hits 15 YPOers in, a nanosecond, and the responses start coming in. So it's a wonderful network in terms of that. But in terms of my own continuous learning, I am very passionate about, well, one, I love my fitness and training, and I combine it with my learning. So I love listening to audiobooks and podcasts, which is why I love being involved in your podcast, today, because I'm a huge fan of the content and the learning that you can get from it. So, for example, one of the ways that I learn a lot about SaaS is there's a great podcast called Sastra, and Jason Lemkin and that crew put out amazing content. And so I'm a regular listener of that. And you just pick up little tips and tricks, from the chief marketing officer at Salesforce or Zendesk or similar, and then you kind of share that back with the team, and you quickly evolve and learn from that. But I love audiobooks as well.
Very good. One of the things you've had to learn over the years, becoming a CEO at a pretty early age, right? Running the company is just hiring and dealing with employees, which is a major part of your life right now. Let's talk about that. What kind of personality and style fit into the StarRez culture the best? Talk to me about the ideal type of employee for you guys.
Yeah, it's look, I think the great thing for us is the ideal person is unique almost every time, because we're a great collection of different personalities and different skill sets, and so we, instead of having sort of a very specific type, what I'm proud of is kind of the fabric of a whole diverse range of people that kind of make up StarRez. And I think we're lucky because of our global footprint. We inherently have diversity through having a team in Australia, having a team in the UK, having a team in the US and Canada. But I think something I've learned in my role is, and I probably didn't think about it like this 5 years ago, is I need to be a very important brand ambassador for StarRez and help drive recruitment activities. So I wasn't as involved in our recruitment activities going back a couple of years ago. You kind of fall into this comfort zone where you're like, oh no, we have a team that does that now. This is great. The business has grown. I don't have to get involved in that too much anymore. But that's a huge mistake, and that's a huge learning. I don't need to be involved in every single interview or, proving things and things like that. But I definitely need to be involved in helping share our story and helping people understand the types of, people that can be successful at StarRez, and also sharing the successes of what our team's doing. That's one of the things that I really spent a lot of time doing. So, in terms of probably the most successful people at StarRez, often they're through referrals. Nothing better than someone who's already at StarRez, has a friend they've worked with before, or a colleague or whatnot. So we really encourage our team to think about referring their friends or family, whoever it might be, that they know through their network to connect with StarRez and look at opportunities. We often find a number of people that join StarRez have previously used StarRez before, so they tend to love the product and they've been a part of our StarRez community, and they really love that environment. And so I'm really proud. We had one person just start yesterday, had actually been out of work essentially for a year, had tremendous skills with StarRez, a tremendous domain experience. And we kept in touch, and it was kind of like, what are you doing? He hadn't found the right thing right now. And, I just kind of nudged the team along, like, let's have another conversation here, because we've got someone who loves StarRez, who's got these great skills. can we find a role? Can we find a way to make this work? And I'm really proud the team found that opportunity and that person joined and is super excited. And I know we'll go on and be, really, really successful for StarRez. But I think, Steve, a couple of things that I look for, I guess if I look over 25 plus years of bringing people into StarRez, there's a couple of things that I look for, a couple of themes. So one is I try to find people that have a passion. Don't mind what the passion is, but one of the questions I'll often ask is, what are you passionate about? Because I've seen a really common thread of like people that have a passion for photography happen to be great technical people. People that have a passion for music and musical instruments often happen to be, great software developers, because learning a music, learning a software code, it's learning another language essentially, and it translates over. But I don't mind if people have a passion for gaming or gardening or car racing or whatever it is. You tend to find, though, that if they've got something that really, some kind of passion that I can unearth in that initial conversation, then I know that there's someone who, really commits to, learning something and learning a craft. And I think for us, that's a common thread in terms of successful people at StarRez.
You've interviewed hundreds of people, hundreds and maybe thousands at this point. Do you have a couple of favorite interview questions that you like to throw out there? A couple of favorites, and if you do, why? Yeah, talk to me about them.
Yeah, so it's funny. I think one of the ones which, funnily enough, you essentially just asked me just before is how do you go about continuous learning? I don't ask it so much in that, but if someone, for example, is wanting to join our product management team, a really, simple thing I love to ask is, okay, so you love product management, that's great. What's an audio book or a blog or a podcast you can recommend to me that you love, that you're following to learn more about the craft of product management? Because if you say you love product management, but if you can't name one blogger, one podcast, or one book, then it probably means you don't really love product management. You were told to say that, because it sounds good. So, it's a little bit of a trick question, but if people are authentic and sincere, then the answer will come really quickly. And they'll say, oh, well, I love this, podcast here. This is my favorite one. That's my go-to, so I think for me, that's actually one of the easy questions that helps me identify if someone's, really genuine about wanting to be in that role.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. So let me ask you a few wrap up, headed towards wrap up here. I guess the first one is you've learned a lot about being CEO now over the years. If you had to give a couple of pieces of advice to a young CEO, they're just getting started in their position, based on what you've learned, what would you tell them today?
Look, one of the ones and the advice that I give, I do end up talking to a lot of startups, not in an official capacity, but I do talk to a lot of people on my sort of in my ventures. And one of the things that I caution CEOs of early stage or startup companies is don't spend so much time trying to raise money. Try to spend your time and effort on building a better product and making money, because you can fund it yourself if you get your product market fit right early and you get those early 10 to 20 customers that absolutely love your solution. This is a true story, Steve. We hired our first full-time marketing resource a year ago. I mean, we've been around for 30 years.
Wow.
Now,
really? Wow.
Now, there's a few of us that have worn the hat and done a bit of marketing and whatnot, but we've never hired a dedicated, professional, experienced marketing person to be full-time on the team with no other responsibilities. Now, if you look at the profile of most early stage tech companies, they hire 10 to 15 people in marketing before they have 10 to 15 people in development, because they're trying to tell the story, because they're trying to raise money. And I feel like if you put I didn't have that distraction of trying to raise money. I was so laser focused on, I've got to get this customer happy. I've got to get this product working, and I've got to get paid, and I've got to have enough money to keep the lights on next month. And whilst it was a little bit more stressful at the time when to run the business, that got us to where we wanted to go a lot faster. We ended up with a better product faster, with happier customers, and so on. So yeah, probably one of the things that I would recommend is people really think about, do I really need to raise money? Or often you see people have raised money and they're already thinking about the next raise, because they've already spent that money in their mind, in their budget. And they're like, well, that $1 million is gone. I've got 3 months. I better get on to the next one. And
That's right.
you just don't give the product and the business enough time really to become successful. And of course, what ends up happening to a lot of them, they run out of money. And I think the other thing for me is, because we never raised money, we ran it incredibly lean, and we were very, very careful about where we spent our dollars. And I think, probably if you gave me $1 million in 2001, I might have spent all that in the first year on marketing as well. But I had, $25,000 probably to spend on marketing that year. And so I picked 3 conferences to go to, and I did them really, really well. I planned them really carefully. I stayed at the cheapest hotels I could, and I just, I did it that way. And it meant that I had to make those conferences work. I had to find some customers from them, and that's what we did. And we got a couple of customers from them, and that kept the ball rolling.
So many great lessons in that, what you just said. You're absolutely right. If you take on cash early, you're thinking about your next raise. And then all of a sudden, by the way, you're dealing with and managing all the people that gave you money. And that takes up your time, and you're focused on that rather than the product and the employees. You're so right. And you just run it leaner. You run it leaner when it's your own cash, and you're having to run it off of your organic cash, and you make better spending decisions. You're absolutely right. So funny. I can relate this to just a recent story. We had a cash flow meeting with our accountant here at recruiting firm Riderflex. And she goes, you and Scott can probably start finally paying yourselves a little bit more now, because we've always just paid ourselves very cheap, right? Because we were like just doing just like you. We were just building the business organically. So we weren't paying ourselves hardly anything. And she said, you can start paying yourself more now. And I thought to myself, we've run it so lean for so long. I guess we're just used to it. Like, I didn't even think about that. It's just so true. You're so right. There's so many lessons in that. By the way, I wonder how many software companies on the planet have been around for 30 years, transitioned it from father to children, and never had to raise cash. I bet there's not very many. That is a small group of people. That's a small list right there. Really small list. Very good. I really appreciate you summarizing some of that. Just a couple more questions really fast. I know we're getting close to being out of time.
Sure.
You're married with kids now? You got family?
I do. Yeah. I've got a great wife of many, many years, and also works actually in the business as well, which people think is a little crazy, working together, but it's always worked for us from some early days. We didn't meet through work, but early on, I asked my wife to come in and temp for us for a month. Believe it or not, her background's accounting and finance too, and our finance manager had just left. And I said, you got to come in and just fill in for a month while we hire someone. She was so good at what we did, we couldn't let her out of that role. So she continued on with that role. And yeah, we've got a couple of young boys, and those that know me well know I'm a super hands-on dad. I love being an active dad and doing a lot of fun stuff with the boys.
Being a CEO and running a company is that's a difficult balance sometimes when you're trying to stay in shape yourself and be active, spend time with your wife, and spend time with your kids. Any quick tips for time management as it relates to the CEO of the family?
Look, I think for me, what I do is, I love to get up early, and that buys me time. Now, that's not for everyone. I realize that maybe I can operate on a little less sleep than some people, but getting up early means that I can get some work done. I get my fitness and everything done before my family's normally even awake. And it helps with my international businesses as well to be able to be on, those time zones. But then I can really crank through a lot of my work and meetings. And by late in the day, that's when I want to, be there for the boys, for their sport and their after school activities. So that's where I block out, time to make sure I'm there to be the dad and be involved in some of those activities. And just try to find that healthy balance, when I'm doing that.
Now, and does your wife, quote, report to you on the org chart?
No, luckily not. And I think at home I report to her. So
working with family can also be delicate. I've seen that blow up. Yeah. Any quick last minute tip there on working with family in general?
Look, I think it can be challenging, but I think if you really kind of define your separate roles and responsibilities and your goals, then I think you can find a way to balance it out.
Was there ever a time early on where you and your dad got into it, just, yelling at each other?
Absolutely, there was, and it's funny to look back on those days. And I realized at the time, I always wondered why. I thought I was doing really well in the business, and I felt like he was a very harsh critic, and I could never figure out, why. But what I realized as I hit probably 25 plus, and I really started to hit my strides with the international business, was he just knew I had more potential, and he wanted me to reach that potential. And in a way, he was preparing me for what was going to be a pretty challenging ride, trying to, grow the business internationally, and a lot of time on my own, living in hotels and trying to, get traction. And, he really kind of, I guess, got me weathered, for those tough days. But it was not always harmonious in those early days. And a lot of that came from, some of the financial stress that the business had, just put everyone under enormous pressure. But once we got a little bit of traction, and once, we got some momentum, then our relationship. And I think for me, going and focusing on a different part of the world, that was one of the great ways to divide up the responsibilities. Is like, I'll take care of international, you guys take care of Australia, and that kind of helps separate that out.
Is your dad still alive today?
Look, sadly, we lost my dad 7 years ago to cancer. So he, but very much his spirit and his values, live on today. We've got an award named in memory of him, along with a couple of colleagues that we lost around the same time, to various things. And so every year we have our team members vote on who they'd nominate to be the StarRez Spirit and Values Award winner. And it's really to help remember, Alan, Dane and Sue that we lost back then. And it's a really great way that we keep their spirit alive. We even have at our global conference, we have something we call the Alan Knipe connection, because my dad was a great networker and loved being with people. So the networking activity that we run at our user conference is also named in memory of him. So we do a few things like that to keep his memory alive.
Very nice. Very cool. Last question, my friend. If you had to put your core purpose into a sentence now, today, at this age, let's separate your kids and your wife for a minute, by the way. Let's set that aside. And that's a primary core purpose. Besides your immediate family, how would you describe your core purpose right now?
Are you talking in terms of StarRez or me personally?
I think you personally, but I want you to try to separate it. Besides taking care of your wife and kids, which is an obvious, right? What is Travis's reason for being on the planet?
Look, I think that's something that if I had the answer to that, I'd share that widely. I think it's something that evolves, and it's something that you challenge yourself on a regular basis. I think right now where I see it is, the business, I feel a huge responsibility with StarRez, that we've got a lot of team members around the world and a lot of customers around the world that are on this journey with us. And I feel really committed to help continuing on that path. So, in terms of that, I think back to what was our purpose in the early days, solving problems with technology. And I think last year with COVID, just to give you an example, we knew our customers were really hurting because of what was going on. And once we identified some solutions we could deliver to make their pain a little easier, we got the product team on that. We delivered some new features within about 10 days. And for me, that was very fulfilling to see that customer feedback. We were able to identify that problem, get some tech in there to fix it, and make, even though life wasn't still fun for most people back then, make it a little bit better. So I guess my purpose is very much still entwined with my life at StarRez. But I think my purpose beyond that is, because I lost my dad, and for me, I felt like I lost him at an early age. I lost him, I was only 35, and he's missed that opportunity to be around my kids. I feel like a huge part of my purpose is to really make sure that I have quality time with my kids, because you just don't know what time you've got here. And so I really want to make sure that I've probably gotten, since I lost my dad, a lot better balance into my life. So fitness wasn't probably a top priority for me 7-8 years ago. And I really made that a priority, to be a better role model for my kids and to make sure that I'm going to be healthy and around for as long as possible. So I think a big part of my purpose is making sure that I'm that, kind of back to your question earlier, is that balance. It took me a long time to refine it and get it to where it is today. But I continue to work on that. But I think, Steve, beyond that, I think a lot about, there's a few charities that we work with. Children's Fortress in Africa is one that actually a former StarRez team member founded.
Okay.
And we're a big supporter of that. Pre-COVID, we went over there and we donated the funds to build a basketball court for basically underprivileged kind of street kids that they are trying to help rehabilitate. And I went over there and saw that firsthand. And when you see those kinds of things and you see the impact of, in our world, probably a relatively small financial contribution, and I brought with me a bag of basketballs, on the plane. I brought 10 balls. And the honest truth is, when I brought those balls out, even if there wasn't a court, they would have been happy just to have 10 basketballs because they just don't have those kinds of things. So I think, it was a great enlightening moment to realize that we live a pretty privileged sort of lifestyle, and my kids do. So I really want to think about what I can do beyond StarRez to help, places like Children's Fortress and maybe how, not just with money though, that's one thing, but in terms of actually getting a bit more involved and being an active participant in trying to help, make it a better world. So, I think that's probably where I'm thinking about what can I do in a post-COVID world to have a bigger impact on the world.
I bet you're looking forward to being able to get on a plane and go see your other offices and check on your home in Colorado, right? You haven't been on a plane in a long time, I guess.
12 months not on a plane is just so unusual. In fact, I just took a flight for the first time a week or two ago just to go up to Sydney, just to test it out. We had to, see what it's like to go through an airport again. But no, I really miss my team. I mean, look, I'm grateful for Zoom and Slack and these tools. But, I've got team members over there. We've been great friends and worked together for more than 15 years. And, we're used to seeing each other every other month. And to not see each other for, 12 months face to face, not be able to have dinner and really sit down and talk to each other in that level of depth. It's really, really getting painful. It's like, I'm ready to go. I'm as keen as possible to get back to it. So really hoping the world, for the world in general, the world just to get to a better place as soon as possible. And I can see things improving now. So we're excited about that.
Couldn't agree more, my friend. I appreciate Zoom and all that too. I'm just like you, yeah, these are cool tools and I'm glad we can all use them, but I like to get together with people over dinner and happy hour and all the rest of it and coffee. And yeah, I'm just like you. I prefer the human to human interaction in the same room if I had to choose. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. The first time you go to the airport, what's going to happen. You're going to kind of fumble around a little bit. You were in so much of a routine going through security and you do little certain things here and there. You're going to go and you're going to be out of practice. You're not going to maneuver as swiftly.
Well, we had that experience, Steve. We were trying to pack our suitcase, which normally would have taken us 3 minutes, pre-COVID, because we would travel so much. It felt like it took us 2 to 3 hours to pack a few things for a short trip. I'm like, we've totally lost the plot here. We've got to get back into practice.
Travis, congratulations on everything you and the family and all the employees have built over the last 30 plus years. Really awesome story. Thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast, my friend.
No, and congratulations on what you're doing as well. I think you're doing an awesome job with this podcast and really excited to be on it. So thanks for your time today.
If you think today's tip or guest interview can help someone you know, please share this with them. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to our channel and hit the like button. The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviewing. You can visit riderflex.com to learn more about us and get information and pricing on the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Thanks so much for listening and have a great day.